Welcome everybody to the Washington County Coordinating Committee Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. And we have some pretty heavy topics on the agenda today. I think everybody knows each other, but just in case, I am just going to call people out to say where they like a roll call. So I'm going to start across my screen. So Peter, do you want to tell us your name? Actually says who you're with, but you want to tell us who you're with, Peter Swinton?
Sure. I'm Peter Swinton. I'm an urban planner with THPRD.
And Michael Ray. Here. I think everyone knows he's central. Okay, so my movie, we don't need to do this. Mike Weston, everybody knows Mike. He's with King City. Hey, all right. Don is here. Erin Wardell is here.
Hi.
Dave Ross. And Terry, everyone knows you're from Cornelius, I guess. All right. Mike McCarthy.
Hello, with Walton.
And Mike is going to be representing TPAC tomorrow, so he'll be particularly listening for everything today. But you cities representing the cities of Washington County at TPAC. Greg Robertson, good to see your face. This is from Forest Grove.
Good afternoon.
And Jason is here. Jason, you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. Jason Waters, City of Sherwood, and kind of being the point of contact for Sherwood. So I've been doing this for on and off every time we do the RTP update. I pretty much show up. So good to be back.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. And we have Teresa Gartner, our staff, support staff. Matt Freitag from ODOT. Matt, I think is Glenn Boland may be joining us as well. But we can bring him in as needed to answer some questions.
Yeah, that'd be good. I'm not sure if Glenn's going to join us today.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember either.
I don't think he's able to.
He wasn't able to. Okay, Kim, you're going to be the expert on things. All right. And Jabra, we'll keep you here until Jean comes. And then we have staff on the attendees list as well. And because of the nature of the topics, I'm going to call out and see if folks on the staff on the attendees list want to comment at some of the key points, because we have a lot to cover. So the first on the list is, the first thing on the list is the the policy approach for the call for projects for the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. And sorry, I'm a little distracted here. So we've been through this before. And so we can do this again. The time allowed is about half of what we had last time. We looked at our memo for how everyone was going to work together. At least all the TAC members should have gotten an email with an outline from Jessica Peltz about how we work together to complete pull all the projects together without overlapping or redundancies, and make sure we hit that financial target that will be allocated to us in the for our share of the regional funding. And then we have we included in the packet the material that was from a TPAC packet a while ago on a draft approach and a little bit of a timeline for the call for projects process. Since then, now in the current TPAC packet is the policy approach. And so for seeking the all the projects that go into the RTP. So I'm going to ask Kim if you want to talk a little bit about, we don't have a PowerPoint, so folks, but you should have all the materials and the link in your TPAC from the TPAC link. And if there's anything you want to just say to introduce the what's new or different this time, Kim, from last time in the policy in the process to develop, sorry, I can't talk today, in the process for developing the RTP project list.
Yeah, so yeah, and you just want to have people ask questions and have discussion. So yeah, I think basically we are following, the same process that we've done in the past, and we're still working to develop the financial forecast. We're waiting. Washington County has been working to finalize their updates to their forecast. I also we have not received information from Sherwood and Forest Grove, so it'd be great to follow up Steve and Greg, or Jason and Greg, following this meeting, just so that we are getting that. And I believe, Dave, we're also waiting to hear back from you on some final updates. So tomorrow we will not have a draft forecast yet, because we need to get all the final numbers, and then we need to back out the operations maintenance portion of that from the forecast, which DKS will be working with each of you to do that. And then we'll be able to establish the funding targets. But essentially the funding targets are going to be the same, but just updated from what we had for the last regional transportation plan update. I would say the other key changes, and some of this is described in the memo, and I'm happy to answer more questions, but we have an updated set of goals. The goals that are linked to in your packet have been the thriving communities goal is actually thriving economy. So the language has not changed of the goal language, but the title has. So just pay attention to that. We've updated the high injury corridors from the last RTP with more current data. So that will be the basis for some of the safety analysis that we'll be doing. We've also updated the equity focus areas with the 2020 census data. So that's an update to that sort of policy area. Process-wise, we're using the hub. One question that's come up a lot is, well, is all the information from the last go around still in there? And the answer is yes. So that's your starting point. We will be working to update, and I think Julie Shimnosky has already done this a little bit for you already, but to update the project cost estimates to be in 2023 dollars. That's what we want. And we really, really strongly encourage you to review your cost estimates very closely as part of this work, because of all the cost escalation factors. DKS, who's been working with us, is going to be developing some additional guidance around that, and simplified spreadsheet if that's helpful for folks. But just really want folks not only to be looking at updating your project details, but the cost estimates are going to, it's going to be really important to have that review. We are relying again on coordinating committees to coordinate all of the compilation of the lists within the targets, and also having the WCCC basically forward your collective priorities as part of the call for projects. New this time is also having each of the agencies having a letter of endorsement from your governing body, basically a letter, so not a formal action or resolution, but a letter acknowledging and supporting the projects that are being forwarded on behalf of your jurisdiction to this. That deadline is actually May 1st. All the other project information, cost estimates, the recommendation from the WCCC we're seeking by that February 17th date. We will be hosting 2 trainings on the hub. Many of you were part of the last RTP update and are familiar with the hub, but December, those dates are in the packet. I can look that up if you don't have those. We'll be sending out an email. Each jurisdiction will have access to the hub. We'll have one person that you will assign to be responsible for inputting the updated information. And I think I'll stop there and see what questions folks have or what more information you would like to have.
Okay. Terry, you have a question?
Hey, Kim, the letter you talked about that's due in May, does that have to come from the city council, or is the city manager good enough, or is the city engineer?
We would like your city council to send it. So it's a governing body. So city council, county boards. We're asking ODOT to have their commission, TriMet's board, et cetera. So
And that's
your
and that's
elected
due May
officials.
1st?
May 1st.
Okay.
Oh, I thought it was due February 17th, Kim.
No, that particular letter, we've extended that. We heard several folks, jurisdictions say that that was going to be problematic, and it also allows that as you're going through the coordinating committee process, you know, that the letters in the end can come from the governing boards in May, just to give you more time.
So you still want the WCC or our WCC to endorse it by February 17th?
Yeah, to forward it to the process. Yeah.
Huh. We couldn't do that backwards? Because it seems like the WCC.
You can
would be
have
the
it.
full
If you
done.
can have it all done by February 17th. That's great. But what we were hearing from several jurisdictions that it just logistically it was going to be challenging with changes in elected leadership, getting briefings, and so basically maybe one of their first meetings of the year and coming in totally cold. So we're trying to.
Get that. I get that. Well, this is something as a TAC we'll have to talk about. It's going to be hard for me to see how comfortable the WCC is going to be to vote on something if it's also going to be required. Would they be jumping the gun by approving or endorsing something? It'll have to be written carefully, or they may not be comfortable doing it, knowing that everybody's governing body has not jumped in. So that we'll have to figure that out. Okay. Yeah.
Chris, when is that the WCCC action? So ideally the jurisdictions in Washington County should be done by then?
Well, Jessica Peltz has laid this all out in a memo that she sent out, and I'd have to pull it up unless she wants to. I'm gonna unmute her, Jessica, and see if she wants to answer this directly. Jessica, do you have that in front of you, those dates? I could pull it up. I'd have to look through my emails for it.
Yeah, and actually, Kim, maybe you can clarify this. So we thought the project submittal hub closes February 17th, so we had all our dates leading up to that to have our approval letter and all the letters going through the WCCC TAC and the WCCC and the board.
Yeah, and that's, and I think that is great. But yes, all of the project information needs to be submitted on the projects that are being forwarded into, for consideration in the RTP, by February 17th. What we're doing is giving you a little more time if you need it to be able to get your elected officials to have a letter of support. But all of the project information is due February 17th.
Well, I think, okay. All right, well, we'll have to think through that, guys, whether we can, because I see some challenges if it hasn't been approved by the cities and there needs to be changes in the hub and the hub is closed. I don't see how that all works. Okay, we're gonna have to figure that out. I'm gonna keep moving. Mike Weston, you had your hand up. Welcome to TSP, Mike.
Yeah, so I had similar questions, Chris. I mean, when I see the spreadsheet, and I was working on it earlier this week, as you are aware, we just finished our TSP, or we have a draft TSP, and I'm wondering, how many of those projects am I supposed to upload into this document when, as you just mentioned, the window is closed, right? So is it for the next window? I mean, do you want me to put them in there, just put them in there just so that we have an outlook? Am I putting in just collector roads? So many questions, and this is my first time through, so I'm apologizing.
Yeah, Yeah, well, so I do have a presentation I can send Chris to distribute that I could have given. But essentially projects to be on included in the regional transportation plan, need to have gone through a public process, which you are going through as part of your TSP. So technically, even though your TSP is not adopted, those would be, I think, eligible for being brought forward but that's why it's in part important that your city council is supportive of forwarding them to the process. There will be a budget for Washington County and the cities of Washington County to work within. Obviously, and how Steve has worked with you all in the past is the monies that you are raising locally that are contributing to the regional system are part of your budget. There may be other revenues or cost target revenue available for additional projects beyond that, but essentially we're asking you to identify your priorities to forward to the RTP that are on the regional system. So they need to be either on the regional motor vehicle map, on the regional bicycle map, regional pedestrian map, regional transit map. So there's we have those regional network maps. So that establishes what is the regional system, and that are helping also advance those RTP goals. So I don't want to go deeper than that, but like at the highest level, and Michael, I'm happy to talk with you more offline too.
2 points on that. One is that you can add to the regional system, Michael, in your case, where you're putting in new roads, you can add those into the regional system if they're on the network, right? This is the time to update the network too, right, Kim?
Yeah, although we were trying to capture as many of those kinds of updates earlier, but yes, and what we have in the motor vehicle network are arterials and above, or roads that are in centers, in industrial or employment areas that may not be an arterial, but are within those 2040 areas.
But only the old 24 areas, not new commercial areas. So we can figure that out when we get there. Yeah. So Jessica, do you want to add anything more about how the county's role in coordinating this and working through Julie Sosnowski? Because we have found that it's easy to have redundancies. It's easy since roads go through multiple jurisdictions to have limits of the projects vary. So we have found it essential to coordinate this list. So I'm asking you again there.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So we sent out a memo about coordinating with the county, and we sent the project list in both an Excel spreadsheet that you can edit directly in Red and send back to Julie, and Julie will be creating a cohesive countywide project list. And then once we get the draft revenue forecast, we can talk in more detail about what that looks like. And we have outlined a series of coordination meetings for us to discuss these issues.
Yeah, thanks.
Kim, do you think the draft revenue forecast will be done before November 10th?
Yeah, and in our projects.
Well, we need to get the county's forecast. We need the other pieces that are missing. So, maybe is there an update of the timing of when we might have that?
Okay. So yeah, I know Steve Kelly's working with DKS to pull all of that together. So I'm not sure where exactly.
It sounded like it was close, but it just is not not there. And as of yesterday, when we met with DKS, they had not received it. I think for Forest Grove and for Sherwood, we have what was assumed in the last RTP, and we can use that as a placeholder for this. But we'd like to, if there's better information, it affects the cost target overall, and so we want to. But we know it's also draft, and even the last time around, you all may recall, the legislative session passed House Bill 2017, and so there was more money that we added to the forecast later in the process. But this is to get us started for the call for projects.
Right, and just a reminder that there is a couple of countywide dollars that it's important to forecast together, like the percentage increases in TDT and the percentage increase in vehicle registration fees that are allocated among all you know, among all cities in terms of the percent increase. Steve, Kelly, is there anything you want to add about the status of the financial forecast?
Yeah, thank you. I can add, I think I've got Sherwood in and complete, as far as I know it is. So that will be available, and we're just a couple of cross checks away from having the county's forecast as well as the county-wide programs. And then there's some additional coordination I need to do with some of the cities that are out there that have various sub-area finance plans with their various strategies associated with them. So we're really close, but those
that's
finance
great.
strategies are really important to get right. And as are the long-term, those county-wide revenue sources.
Right.
So we're triple checking those, and our goal was to get something out this week. We'll see, we're close.
All right. And we also have several new urban renewal areas from cities in the county that will be new funding sources that weren't included last time. So that it's always changes. Okay, I'm going back to see whose hand was up next. Don, I think it was yours.
Peter was ahead of me.
Oh, Peter. Oh, that is your hand goes over your THPRD symbol.
Yeah, that's a little tricky. So I think this might be a relatively quick question, but I was noticing that there's on January 27th a preliminary project list deadline, and I wanted to know what level of detail is expected for that preliminary project list.
It doesn't have to be a high level of detail. What we're trying to gauge is just how much change there's going to be in the project list itself, just to set ourselves up on the modeling side. And, so it's just to give sort of a check and to have sort of a more near term, that folks are working on it. And then and if there's questions or issues that we need to resolve, there's still some time to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Don?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, we had a good meeting with Steve, I think day before yesterday on our costs. Kim, important to note that I'd had Brad submit kind of I'll call it was highly covered with disclaimer. It was very draft, preliminary cut. Carl Springer joined us in that meeting, by the way, Steve Kelly, so he heard all this. But I've got my guys, our team is basically working to polish up our costs. So we'll be getting some updated costs into you guys through Steve, of course, in coordination with Steve. One of the items that we shared this with Steve, we've done a lot of detailed work, both in our really threefold, 2 large growth areas that have highly detailed cost estimates where projects are broken down. These are all greenfield roads by and large, where we've broken down creditable versus non-creditable. And then our citywide TSP, which is, I want to say it was $1.5 billion. But again, every project was taken through the sieve of creditable, non-creditable, which Kim will probably remember last RTP, I had made comment that we were underestimating the amount of private sector non-creditable that comes into play. So we've got a lot more data on that. My plan is to provide that back up to Steve. And then my encouragement was, if you guys are interested at the city levels, Steve can share that, the allocation, greenfields, what's the ratio for collectors and arterials of creditable versus non-creditable. And then same thing when you're talking about non-UGB, but really what I call infill development, infill road growth. So resources there as well. And then Kim, question to you, something that I brought up. I think I've shared this with Chris and then talked about it with Steve a little bit as well. But one of the things that we ran into a challenge on last RTP cycle, and I expect we will again, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, is that I remember we went through this process and there was an evaluation done by Metro staff that basically said, hey, Washington County has very little projects going towards safety. And in reality, a lot of our projects are addressing safety, but most of our projects are, by their nature, a lot of greenfield, type developments where we're building safety components in from the onset: sidewalks, bike lanes, crossings, lighting, all those kinds of things that, in the traditional sense, are retrofitted in, and we call it a safety project. So I really want to be sure that we're thinking proactively about how we categorize our investments and not, inherently penalize the fact that we're building complete streets from day one in these growth areas. And, as such, they truly are a safety investment, proactive, not retroactive. So just wanted to get your thoughts on how. I haven't looked at any of the forms for input yet. I know in the past when we've done that, you had to kind of check certain boxes, one of which was whether it was a safety project, but just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Sorry, unmuted. So yes, there is a definition of safety, and there's specific safety countermeasures. So if a project includes those, then it constitutes specifically a safety project. It's not just that it's building complete streets, but it actually has those safety countermeasures as part of it. And I think in some cases it was more that project descriptions didn't actually call out the kinds of things that they were doing that were part of that. So that is how we will be flagging that, but we will also be identifying, where there are investments that are doing exactly what you're saying that are on the high injury network. I think also if, we know that, in the case in this part of the region, but also Clackamas County, there's been other safety analysis work. ODOT's done safety analysis work too. And so, I think, in the project descriptions, it's important just to call out, if these are high, if it's, maybe it's not on the regional high injury corridor, but because of your local work that you've done, you can call out that it's been identified as a high injury corridor locally or through, some other study. So I think, I hear what you're saying, and but the safety definition is definitely a very specific definition that was developed as part of the 2018 RTP. That'll be part of we are creating, similar to what we did last time, the project submission guide that has all those definitions, an explanation of that with guidance on how to, how to review and respond to the questions in the hub. And again, in all the cases, all the data that was submitted the last time around is all in the hub. So it's, unless you're adding new, when you're adding new projects, you'll have to refill out that. But in the case of projects that are already in there, you're updating those descriptions, as well as project costs and other information that maybe you know better or something's changed since 2018.
Okay, thanks.
So Kim, just to recap what your answer to Don. So if we have a road that is ditches and we are upgrading it with stormwater and bike lanes and sidewalks and complete streets. So we're doing it to make it safer and more, walkable, bikeable.
Right.
Then
completing gaps. Yep.
Yeah, or upgrading existing ones that are not really to a standard we want. So if it's not on a high injury corridor and it's not using one of the official federal countermeasures, are you saying we can't count it as a safety project?
It's not defined explicitly as a safety project, but it is going to improve safety. So so there's, I think what's the distinction is there is a specific definition for safety. All projects are going to improve safety, and that's how you design. I mean, that's what you're doing things that
Right.
you're not going to do something
Right.
that's not safe. So so everything can't be a safety project. So that's why that like as it's all going to help. Complete streets help improve safety. Yes.
So Kim,
in the
messaging,
explicitly a safety project.
In the messaging that ultimately gets up to like a Metro councilor, in the past, I think there's been a perception that, hey, we're not putting enough of our money to safety. And in reality, most of our money is going to building new facilities in these growth areas that are effectively trying to be safe from day one, right? And so I'm hoping that, we can count on you and other Metro staff to be communicating that narrow filter of federal language, they've got to be able to see through the fact that, and maybe that's simply looking at, a filter on these projects, what are new roads that are greenfields versus what are, infrastructure enhancements. That would be maybe a way of getting at it. And then within the framework of the enhancements, that's where your safety tight scrutiny applies. I remember we lived tumbling into that problem last time around. I'd like to be ahead of it. this
Right.
cycle. So
Jean,
Yeah.
you have what happened to your hand, Jean?
I took it down.
You still have a question?
Not really. I'll follow up with Kim offline.
Right.
Just some particulars.
Well, I think this is a good chance to go through some of these particulars. Like I have one about all of these. Could you talk about the relationship between the TSP? Because a lot of the projects we moved into the RTP have already been through a TSP or local process. So they should already be, since TSPs are tied to RTPs, they should also be, there shouldn't be any question with a project that gets submitted, right? Because it should be all copacetic. Is that the right word?
Yeah, and I think that, yes, your plans, if they're adopted and acknowledged by the state, they're consistent with the RTP. So there's not this is, so I feel like I'm hearing in your question that there's some filtering of projects that's happening, and that's not happening. We're asking you to identify your priorities in the near term and the long term for the regional system that are helping advance the RTP vision and goals. They're helping advance things that are priorities in your plans as well that are on the regional system. And we're going to be communicating back to policymakers, to the public. This is the region's set of investment priorities for the next 23 years, at least until the next RTP update, that we're working to build to address safety, to address climate, to address equity, to address the economy, of address mobility. So, it's looking at the totality of them. And so we will be, trying to, I think, to Don's point, characterize like what's in this project list. Well, there's going to be a lot of investments in downtowns and centers and main streets. There's going to be a lot of gaps that are, that were completed as part of the last update that, are still priorities. I think just looking at, traffic fatalities and serious injuries are continuing to increase, despite all of the good investments that are being made to improve safety. But we'll be talking about how is the region doing that, and some of them are specific safety projects. Some of it's completing those gaps. It's bringing roads that were serving more farm to market to urban standards. That's an important part of a growing part of the region. So, I feel like I am sensing like there's this like.
Well, I think the sense is how it gets messaged, as Don's point, how it gets messaged at the end about. I guess we don't want folks to think that we aren't working on safety projects in Washington County if we do put that many buses.
I think that's.
Jabra has been waiting patiently.
I'm sorry, and I will follow up on that to Kim. Jabra.
I just have a question in defining what a safety project is. From what I understood now, Chris explained exactly what typically we do. Anything we do, there is a safety element in it. But you're defining these new projects based on crash data?
Yeah, I can send the follow-up guidance and specific. There's a lot of definition in there, and I don't want to like leave something out. But I can.
Okay.
But then, excuse me. Then you mentioned gaps in the system, and these are all in the projects listed under the current RTP. So to have just a safety project based on safety, I think it's going to be based on some crash data, and this will change with time too. You move in 1 year, then your list will change depending on the data range you look at. And it becomes really difficult to identify a project, oh, this is just safety only. How about the arts program? They address all safety issues based on crash data.
I think, Jabra, I think Kim's going to send out some more information. I'm looking at the packet now. We are going to put it in the chat. And then remember, we don't have a chat. We're not allowed to have chats on Zoom. But there will be more information. We'll make sure everybody gets it for the definitions. But yeah, we've done this before. We'll get through it. we will figure it out. Don, you have a question?
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to get to a charger because my laptop's dying. size of projects, we in the past have had kind of a $1 million minimum or $2 million minimum. Many of these safety gap filling projects, RFB crossing enhancements, by their nature are fairly small cost. Is there guidance that we should be aggregating these into like a programmatic project, Kim? How do we want to do that so we're not losing track of all the good work we're doing at a smaller, discrete project scale? And then I had a follow-up question regarding your collectors. So if you want to answer the first one first. Then.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. So the cost threshold is 2 million. It was $1 million in the last go round, but we thought that I did cost escalation. A lot of them are probably going to go above that 2 million, with project cost increases. There are about I think 100 that are around that 1 million threshold. But what we're recommending is that you group them. And so that would be a great bundle. And you could identify a corridor that, that you're gonna, you want to tackle, and it would be nice for the programs to be specific to at least a corridor so that we can then talk about it as, whatever corridor that is, whether it's 185th or TV highway or whatever, that we can then, just have it be part of the accounting and reporting out, and not just sort of a generic safety program bucket, but be a little more specific about where it might be, or maybe it's along transit corridors, just sort of thinking out loud there. But yes, that we encourage those kinds of things for that.
Okay, thank you. And then I have a follow-up question. You made a comment earlier about collectors that, and it was really, the way I heard it was kind of a subset of collectors that are in Metro's eyes, regional system. For us, I think out in Washington County, where transportation development tax applies to collectors and arterials, we already are filtering our O&M costs, and we've got some other revenues, let's say, between the non-federal system and the federal system. I want to make sure that in the past, I seem to remember last cycle, we're going to be submitting projects for effectively all of our collectors, all of our arterials that are in our, plan, consistent with our TSP. Is Metro looking at identifying and wanting to sub-select specific collectors out of that collector group? I understand all our arterials, but can you give a little bit more depth on the collectors if we're going to screen some are in, some are out?
Yeah, so, going back to what's eligible to be in the RTP, it needs to be on the regional system, and collectors are not part of the regional system. Chris's point is, are there collectors that are really operating more like a minor arterial? Mm-hmm. And maybe they should be designated as a minor arterial in the RTP, then that, would be an appropriate thing to recommend. But it's arterials, basically arterials and throughways that are on the motor vehicle network. Unless it's also, a road is on, one of the other network maps. And then 2040 centers, employment areas, industrial areas are all part of the regional system, as RTP being a tool for implementing the 2040 growth concept. And so we have had collector level streets, many in downtown Beaverton, the Rose BG and other projects like that, that they're not arterials, but they're an important part of a downtown area that have been projects in the RTP in the past.
Yeah, and I'm thinking along those lines, because if it's not on the vehicular side, it probably is, certainly on the pedestrian and bicycle system. And in that regard, it's likely how it's portal into the federal system. So, all right, so we just need to be, making sure we're looking at just the continuity of that. All right, thank you.
I have a couple of other little questions, Kim. I didn't really mean to put you on the spotlight on this. I thought we do have background information we stuck in the packet, but the packet went out before your latest one came in. But in your latest packet, which we tried to put in the chat, it's listed on your agenda if people want to click on that. It is the term thriving economy. I'm pleased to see that's been expanded for serving the variety of needs across the region. It calls out 2040 centers. Can we also take this to mean new development? 20 centers, I think, that's dated. There's been so many new areas developed that could, does it have to be a 2040 center? Or could it be a South Hillsborough Center, for example, that's developed, or other new centers that are developing, that have since developed.
Well, I think this was intended to point to, you know, the 2040 growth concept areas. So, yeah,
So we,
that
okay.
yeah, that is what that is.
So
intended.
if we're improving a road serving a new urban area that's come in since 1998, how does that road get classified then? Is it not under thriving? It doesn't support thriving economy then?
I think that's maybe being a little too literal, because maybe it's an arterial connection that's connecting that growth area. And so it's part of
Okay.
building a multimodal system. I think the point of that goal area is about supporting 2040. It's supporting concept plan areas that are being planned to be brought into the urban growth boundary. You know, and I guess I'm not familiar enough. You know, I know like in South Hillsborough, there is a center area there, you know, as I recall, but maybe the other areas are more residential in nature. And so I don't, you know, there may be a road that's connecting that into the rest of the region, or, I don't know.
Okay, all right. And then, so if we have a capacity or road project, it would fit under thriving economy, because mobility measure is now only mobility options. It's not, it's only for low carbon.
Again, I think that's being a
Too
little
literal?
more literal. I mean,
Okay.
this is
We'll
about
figure it
building
out.
a multimodal transportation system.
All right, just the definitions are fairly specific in here, so it raises the questions. All right, I did, you know, I have to tell you guys that this is going to be the easy part of the discussion today. I hate to say that, but you all have done this. Not everybody has, but most of you have been through the RTP project list development before, and it's a bit of a flurry, but it's a lot of it is updating what's already there. One of the challenges, I think we're gonna have less money this time because everything's gonna cost more, and I don't think our revenue has gone up, will be shown to have gone up as much. So I think that will be a challenge. But Jessica's got a schedule all figured out for everyone to work together on. So we will be fine getting through this.
All's well that ends. It's a good thing about RTP is we get to start it again in 4 years. So
5 now, 4. Is it 4, Kim?
Well, it's due every 5 years.
Right.
So
yeah. Probably for you, it feels like it never stops.
As bad as it is for all of us, Kim only gets a vacation once every 5 years.
Yeah.
A couple months off, of course, she restarts.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's not quite true. I try and find a balance there.
No.
Can't
we
work
do
all the
appreciate
time.
you so much, all the work you do to
put
this together.
Absolutely.
Okay, so guys, the next part is the hard one. And I am not the expert on this, but I will introduce it, and we will have discussions, I'm sure a good discussion on it. The next topic is the regional mobility policy, and this is work that has been underway for, Kim, 2 years, maybe 2 years about, for
since 2019. We've done 3 years of work.
3 years of work, and it's been a real brain twister, I have to say, to get your head around. And we are now at the point with we are going to be asked at TPAC tomorrow to make a record. I think I just pulled my RTP packet apart incorrectly, to make a recommendation to JPAC on moving forward with the regional mobility policy, with a commitment to continue to work on refinements. And Kim, you could probably say that better. I'm flushing through my packet now. But the basics are moving away from an intersectional level of service measure in both the RTP and the Oregon highway plan for throughways identified in the Oregon highway plan. So there'll be the same measure, just like there was when it was implemented in 2000, I think, when the interim measures were put in. And so this, it expands beyond the use of level of service and plan amendments, and takes more of a complete system approach with three key measures being VMT per capita, if it's a residential for home-based trips, and VMT for employees to measure that, for measuring system completeness, and for measuring hours of congestion, if I said that right. And the action before us is to, I didn't have these pages flagged. The recommended action is to accept the draft regional mobility policy measures and targets and the draft implementation action plan and support moving forward to refine and test the measures for measures and targets to be included in the 23 transportation plan. So correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly, Kim, but it's really the action is to accept the basically the framework of the measures and targets at this point with it's like a 2-page list of continued steps that would be continued to be evaluated. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's right. And the action plan also has additional work, some of which would be happening concurrently with the RTP that the state is already doing to support implementation of the climate-friendly, equitable community rulemaking. And it wouldn't be until adoption of the policy, the final recommended policy targets and measures, and as part of the RTP, that it would kick in other work to implement it in our region, like in the functional plan, to forward it to the Oregon Transportation Commission. They're in the process of updating their Oregon Transportation Plan now, and we'll also be starting an update to the Oregon Highway Plan. And their staff will be looking at bringing some of this work forward into those efforts as well.
Okay. Well, I think there has generally been agreement that looking at LOS only was narrow. And the support in looking at a broader system. I'm still trying to get my head around it, to be honest, on how you look at the complete system plan. So I am still in their learning phase for sort of how this would all work. So that's why I do support the continued efforts to sort of work through how well this works, with the caveat that this is draft, and if we find that we need to make some refinements, we could do that. And that it would be continue to be working with jurisdiction staff to iron out these.
Working through TPAC and TAC and you all
right
too.
So it is. I have to say, like I said, it's been a huge undertaking, 3 years already to get here. So we don't have a presentation to share for you. But I'm hoping everybody's read their homework because it was in the packet. So, and that we can have a discussion now about it. So I think Don beat Jean this time. Jean, you have to be faster.
Yeah, and so we've got a written response that's being sent to Kim and others. And so we have a number of concerns here that I understand the direction we're heading in. I believe we still have a lot of work to do to get there. A number of elements of the policy that we think are problematic. Number one, the methodologies of VMT per resident, VMT per employee. When I've got, Metro Zone modeling staff in a work session, putting into the chat box, and I took a picture of it, that, they basically said, look, our tool is not capable of providing that type of input with any accuracy. The concern that I have is it become a litmus test for growth, whether that be a residential UGB or an employment growth area. We clearly have a lot of work to do to try to figure out how we get to a VMT, per capita measure. And so I'm really concerned about trying to read too much science into something that's clearly not even an art yet, let alone a science. that's one factor. Number two, we need to recognize the term level of service for as a transportation professional engineer. We haven't been using level of service in our industry for probably the better part of 10 years. It's been volume to capacity. So effectively that's
Right.
That's not the same thing. I know it's wonky. It's not. It's delay based when you talk about level of service. So just as
Yes, I get it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The other one that, you know, and one of the ones that I'm concerned about, and I'm going to lean on Greg. Greg, I texted you. I don't know if you saw the text, but you know, we've been talking and it's taken way too long, but we had retained the services of Dr. Linda George at Portland State University, who's a renowned air quality scientist, to study performance on 26 and I-5, correlating travel speeds, travel density to roadside emissions. And Greg's going to pull up a plot. We're pressing her to get her paper published. She was supposed to have that published this summer. She's behind schedule. But where I'm going on this is the performance on the highway system. I don't think, you know, any of us really have, I certainly don't have great heartburn on the fact that during the peak couple hours in the morning and afternoon, you know, speeds likely are going to be below 35. I think that's kind of a recognition that when we say you can't build yourself, you know, build your way out of congestion, where our concern lies is in those non-peak periods, using an average speed of 35. What you're going to see in this air quality plot is that even at 35, you're starting to get a disproportionately high surge of emissions based upon a diminishing efficiency of movement of vehicles. And, you know, I think that in the non-peak periods, we ought to be setting the bar at a minimum of 35 because of the fact that, you know, you'll see that the air quality performance is much better. The other thing that I'm concerned about is the economic impact of lowering our bar so dramatically during the day when freight needs to be able to be moving. You know, nobody's done an economic impact analysis on this, and I think it absolutely warrants that. And so those are a couple of key things that jump out at me. And I think the other piece that ties into that is perhaps an unintended consequence is we have to remember that the freeways are our safest facility in the entire portfolio in terms of number of crashes, you know, per million vehicle miles traveled. And why is that? It's got the least conflicts. Not supposed to be pedestrians, bicyclists out there. You don't have transit stops along the freeways. You just don't have the conflict points that even with the intersections come into play. Where you do have conflicts, that's the weave merge at the ramps. Auxiliary lanes help. Back to the auxiliary lanes topic. But I'm really concerned that if we're lowering the bar of performance expectations on the freeways, what that's translating to is that we're inherently pushing more demand onto the surface network where those vehicles come into conflict with pedestrians, with bicyclists, with people trying to get to transit. And then also you'll see this again with this emissions plot, you're bringing the emissions closer to where people live. And so to me that you got 4 strikes against you there. And I just don't see why it feels like it's counter to what we're trying to achieve on the climate and safety fronts. And Greg, do you have that plot available that you can share with folks?
I do, but I'm not able to share it on this group, but that's fine.
Well, we'll get it out so you guys can look at it. But anyway, it's Chris, is there a way that we can route that through your team for distribution so others can see it? I want to be sure Mike has
You mean, is it
access
the
to
email?
it going into TPAC tomorrow.
Are you talking about the letter you sent to Kim?
No, this is actually a piece of research that's
No, sure.
in draft
Yeah.
publication by Dr. Linda George.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can forward it out to everybody.
Okay, Greg, if you could forward that to Chris then for distribution, I'd appreciate it.
I'll do
And I
that,
want to be
Don.
sure Mike's got it for tomorrow. Mike's going to be covering for me tomorrow at TPAC, so. Thank you.
Would it be okay if Don just sent that also to Kim, just to make sure that she has it?
Yeah, let's
I
do
could refer to
that.
it tomorrow, just in case I forget to bring it up or I can't get the technology to work.
Thank you, Greg. Go ahead and include Kim in that original distribution then. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to comment.
Jean, you were patiently waiting.
Yeah, thanks. I don't have any really strong comments one way or the other on this because I'm just, I have not delved into the memo. It's heavy, but it was funny because Chris, you were saying, like, literally as I was looking at the diagrams in the memo, you were saying we don't have a presentation for this, but I actually am looking through them, and I just at least appreciate the flow charts and the yes, no, you know, pathways. I think for Beaverton, like, you know, we're gonna have to be diving into this too, particularly with our TSP update. So I don't necessarily have any comments one way or the other. I feel like we've been talking about this like since I arrived at Beaverton, which was 3.5 years ago, right? So it's great to see it kind of get to this this place, right? I know it's taken longer than we thought, but I at least appreciate that. I don't know if there's anything within those flow charts that's worth talking through today. If we wanted to share a screen, if that would be helpful for people, I don't know, just offering that up.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I was trying to pull it up. I think I have it up. Right.
Yeah. Right, Kim. Like, is there what's the key takeaway you want us to like?
She wants us to say yes.
Well, I know that, but like, what should we?
Yeah.
Like, what would help us all get
yeah,
there?
I think that it's good that you're asking questions. I think part of this is change is hard. This is it took a long time to get to the current policy that's in place as well. And there's a lot of unknowns. And, I think, I'd like to say we're going to have it all figured out by the time the RTP is adopted, but I know that we won't, because there's a lot of other things that are happening that are also influencing this work to implement the climate friendly, equitable communities rules, the highway plan update, the OTP update. ODOT is committed to this policy, from their senior leadership, and they've been part of development of this. And and we recognize that we still have more questions, and need to continue to answer those questions and figure out some of the technical details. I don't share Don's assessment of our model. I think our model actually is a very good tool, and we're going to try and work with them on how to do this in a way that can support the plan amendment process. It works very well at a system level, and I think our concern all along has been how does this play out at the plan amendment level? And the state is committed to developing tools to support implementation. So I think that we want people to continue to be part of helping us make it better, help it fit into the processes. But we, there isn't a better solution to go back to the current place. Like, we have to go forward.
Right.
But, sticking with what we have it's been a barrier to some of the development that you have wanted to do, because you can't meet the volume to capacity targets in the highway plan. We've found throughout the process that that the way that when some of the state needs are not being evaluated using volume to capacity. They're using the speed measure. They're using 45 miles an hour in our region. And so there's also just inconsistencies in how the current policy is and the same issues that are challenges, I would say, that we need to work through exist for the volume to capacity ratio. It's not like that was a better solution or tool, and it was leading us to other outcomes sometimes than what we wanted to do, or that depending on the area, particularly in downtowns that we're trying to upzone, have development in the places that everybody has been planning for the last 25 years because of 2040, but couldn't do it because you couldn't meet a motor vehicle capacity threshold, and that's not helpful to communities. So this, I think, is it's a more comprehensive way of looking at it. It's thinking about more than vehicles. It's thinking about all parts of the system. And I would say it also is aligning our region to be able to meet those CFEC rules and the new performance measures that are being asked of transportation system plans, to have more than just a motor vehicle measure for addressing mobility.
Jean, is this the chart you liked?
Yeah, that was the first one I came to. There's several others, but Can I just ask one question of the group while we're here? And I don't know which cities if we're missing any. Beaverton's gonna start work on its TSP update this coming year. Is anybody else? And so we're going to be in the like, hi, CFAC rules and this new policy. Is anybody else starting up a TSP this year? Or I'll
We
say
are.
even next. You are. Okay.
Yeah, Tualatin is actually, we have an RFP hitting the street tomorrow. And so we'll be going through our own update. I believe Milwaukee is also, and I think they may be
Milwaukee's
just a little bit
already
ahead of us.
underway. Yeah, they're ahead of us. No, I just asked because there's sort of like maybe a TSP users group support group.
Yeah.
And
Help.
we aren't starting it up, but we're also going through the process
Yeah.
ourselves. So we still have to go through the public hearings and everything.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kim, I do remember when the old, 1.0 or 0.99 2-hour policy was adopted, and nobody knew how to make that work for 2 hours because everyone had only been measuring it for 1 hour. So there's bound to be questions as we move forward. And I do think we're going to have to be open to working through these because it is, there's a lot here. So Dave, I think you beat Mike.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really helpful, Kim, having that additional perspective and you had a little kind of reminder in there for me anyway of the case study work that was done early on in this process. And I think it's helpful for us to recall back that there is, I think, sound rationale for going in a different direction here so that we can meet some of our growth goals in urban areas. And so I really appreciate the more comprehensive approach. I think, Dawn, in your comments, you didn't really touch on system completeness. And I think that's a really valuable measure for us in thinking about, using that as a performance measure. So people do have different ways of getting around. I know in Tigard we have so many gaps, and on our arterials, collectors, neighborhood streets that we're trying to fill and provide ways for people to get around without having to take a car trip. And I guess just a final thought on VMT. I think VMT can mean different things in different contexts. I think a lot of people see that as, high VMT is strong economic growth and movement of goods and people and things are happening. But you can also look at it as like it's a burden as well. If people are having to travel a lot in their car to meet their basic needs for short trips, and those VMTs add up, that's a burden on people. And so I think there's some opportunities here that they're not going to happen overnight, but you're setting a foundation for a long-term change that will allow people to travel without having to get in a car, and that's a big problem. So today, thanks.
So I think Mike, you're next, and Steve Kelly's been working on this in great detail in our group, so I'd like to hear from him too. So Mike, you want to jump in next?
Oh, sure. I think I remember back to about 10 years ago when we were really pushing for this to get started. And I think one of the examples at that point was the Tiger Triangle. And, how do we allow the kind of smart development that's planned in the Tiger Triangle when the VC ratio policies, when 99 is already at VC of 1 on most of the intersections, along with Highway 217 and other places. I think, so I'd like to find ways to really allow the kind of smart development that we're planning in the places that we're planning it. My concern is that when I've seen policies change and they, open up extra, I don't know if you call it capacity or kind of analytical capacity or places for more vehicles, when we've opened up for those extra trips, the car intensive uses have kind of sucked it up first before the smart development could get there. And I'd want to see, how do we set this up so that it really works the way that we intended, so that it allows the smart development, the denser and the more alternative mode kinds of development, and not have that capacity sucked up by the car intensive uses. So I guess that's one. And then I think one of the big questions I have I like the idea of system completeness. I have a lot of questions about how it would work in practice and how it would be measured, and would it be like until all of the walking biking infrastructure is complete, you can't do any car stuff, or how do they come together? How do you handle places like bridges over railroads or freeways, or the south side of TV highway where you've got a railroad? They don't want sidewalk near railroad. How do we handle that and measuring your system completeness?
Yeah, it's definitely not limiting you just to completing those parts of the system before motor vehicle. And just also it's important this is one of many policies that we're trying to balance when we're doing system planning and doing comprehensive land use plans. So you have safety policies, we have equity policies, we have climate, this is one of many that are being balanced, and it overlaps with the climate policy because of the system completeness and the VMT measure. But it doesn't mean that you don't do motor vehicle projects. That's also part of it. But it also calls for more operationalizing the congestion management process, which is you do look to do those things, but in the end, you may still need to do motor vehicle capacity. You should also be looking at, are there demand management strategies or system management strategies that could be implemented as well. So it's looking at the full system and all parts of the system, and how do you make it operate as effectively and efficiently for everybody and not just the cars.
Yeah, thanks. And I sure hope in the future it wouldn't get interpreted to mean like we'd have to implement tolls before we can implement capacity.
Or you're implementing tolls when you do implement capacity to manage that demand. Yeah,
and then one of the other just concerns that I have is with the I like the 35-mile-an-hour threshold in a lot of ways, because below 35 is when we really start seeing the diversion happening, and the people getting onto the surface streets and causing problems. And at 35 and higher, we can still keep pretty much the same capacity on the freeway as like 65. And so in that way, I mean, I like the 35 as the cutoff. I think I really have concerns about a policy that would basically say we're going to allow our freeways to become parking lots for 4 hours, and the resulting diversion on the surface streets that would happen with that, and the resulting safety, like increases in fatal and serious injury crashes. Because we've seen the data. I think it was in the state of safety report that when someone diverts off the freeway, they have 7 times the rate of fatal and serious injury crashes than they did when they were on the freeway. And so the safety concerns there. I think I also have questions about the emissions, the stop and go emissions compared to kind of travel speed emissions. I mean, we know that we get our best gas mileage when we're traveling smoothly at like 50 miles an hour compared to stop and go city traffic. So they're just some of the concerns that I have with it.
Thanks, Mike.
I really applaud you for taking it on.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's one of the more challenging ones. Steve has been tracking this for over 3 years. Steve Kelly, you want to jump in?
Thank you. Yes, I'm one of those that also remembers the change from the 2000 RTP. And actually, we tracked all of these sorts of performance measures with the development of the Washington County TSP about I hate to say it, almost a decade ago now. And we came to similar sorts of conclusions and considered complete streets and some of these other measures during the development of our TSP. And just to talk about complete streets for a second, we've been working on a draft of our development review procedures update, and it's consistent with the complete streets methodology that's being proposed with the RTP. I think they're very similar in a lot of ways. So one of the reasons we've been sort of holding that as a draft, one of several, COVID being another, but the waiting to see what comes out of this process. And so I'm encouraged that these are quite similar, and I'm supportive of all 3 of these measures. On the freeway measure, just briefly, I think this is really informative for the RTP and other sorts of studies. It's kind of like the old vehicle hours of delay measure, but it actually gives a real point of comparison, especially when it's used to track existing conditions or changes or differences between now and existing, between the scenario in the future and the existing conditions now. And then just quickly on the VMT measure, Kim, I thank you for characterizing the way you did the approach on the VMT measure. And I think it's really important that we continue to manage expectations for what is really being looked at both with the 23 RTP, as well as how this gets developed and implemented and utilized over time with the tools that are contained in the action plan. So just specifically, there's a gray box on page 6 of the memo, discusses with the discussion on page 7, and it recognizes how those existing volume capacity measures and other measures will continue to be used for assessing operational deficiencies. And I think it's really important that we understand that's going to be the case. And as these new spreadsheets are developed with the VMT-based tools, those will be important to look at, evaluate, consider, and ultimately adopt so that we know what we're talking about when it comes to how we go about using this at something less than the regional level. So again, thank you. I think you've characterized it well, but I think that's the point of emphasis, is sort of managing expectations about what this VMT measure will do, and then emphasizing also that this is a comparison between scenarios, not an absolute number. I think a lot of people have a lot of preconceived expectations about what the VMT measure will implement and what it won't. And people jump to those conclusions right away, and we're not there yet. So managing those expectations, I think, is critical. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And for your reference, he's referring to page 6 of the TAC packet that there's a link on your agenda for. Who else? Don, do you want to go before Joe? I think your hands was up sooner.
Let me unmute. Thank you, Steve. I thought you said that well regarding the modeling is better as a comparative tool than an absolute tool. And so you use better words than I did. To Dave's comment about complete systems, we certainly, having just recently updated our TSP, we're probably more complete in alternative modes than most jurisdictions. We've been, I think, blessed with being a newer community building that infrastructure over the last 2 decades. So in that regard, I think we're in better shape. The one thing that always is glaring to me, and I honestly, with Forward Together, I got transit envy. I found myself very much envious of Beaverton and Tigard, and of course, Portland's like, oh my gosh, you guys have so much more transit available as a resource than does most of Washington County. And so when we talk about system completeness and the desire to not have folks relying on the automobile, the reality of it is trips that are taken that are more than about 3 to 4 miles long, if you don't have transit, you don't have anywhere near a complete system, and it inherently causes folks to have to default to an automobile. And so that's one of the things that in the detail of this thing, I'm really curious as to how this is going to play out, because last time I checked, not one of us on this call, maybe we've got Michael from TriMet. So we got one person on this call that owns a fleet of buses. The rest of us really have, well, maybe Wilsonville's in here too, but most of us don't have any control of that key component of system completeness. And that is what effectively we can plan for. I got South Hillsborough, I've got bus stops, I got shelters, I got no buses. And so while we can aspire, we can't control it, and we can't control the when. And in the meantime, people are moving in and they still have to get to work. And so that's kind of a reality for the vast majority outside of the core of Portland. And again, Tigard and Beaverton, I know there's room always for more transit, but you guys are in far better shape than most of us within Washington County. So I'll leave it at that. I thought Steve did a good job on the VMT piece. Thanks.
Joe, I know you've been working on this a lot like Steve has. Do you want to add anything, Joseph Ott?
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Hi, I'm Joseph Ott. I'm with the City of Hillsborough Transportation Systems Division. Before I came over from the city to the City of Hillsborough, I worked for the Oregon Department of Transportation, and I worked on many of these alternative performance measures with Metro and with ODOT, and we always landed that PC is the best form of measure. There's always alternatives how you can apply PC. I keep on hearing people saying, well, it's limiting the Tiger Triangle. Well, there's ways that you could measure it differently. You don't have to use it as an intersection PC. You can just look at if ODOT cares about the priority of ODOT is the throughput of the corridor, you can just do the through PC. You don't have to look at the entire intersection and let the intersections fail. There's also other approaches where I know ODOT has worked with, City of Portland for certain communities where they didn't even look at PC. It ended up hurting City of Portland later on when development came in, and after all the development came in, people living in the area going, "Hey, our roads are congested," and we need to do something about it. And Portland looked at us, and then we basically said, "Hey, you guys wanted us to not look at PC. You have to live with what you get." So that's kind of. There is like flexibility with their PC. I just don't want to make it sound like that. Oh, it just sounds like it's been utilizing poorly, but there's always ways you can change it in certain ways. As I documented in my letter, I know a lot of you haven't shared it, but what this group really needs to do or have their consultants do is really look at the highway capacity manual, and looking at the volume and speed on freeways are basically tied together. And you can't say, and there was a comment earlier saying that you can share the same volume for 35 and 65. That's actually untrue. If we're looking at what the memo was saying about unsteady flow, the breaking point for 35 miles per hour is 3,675 vehicles per hour. And we're dealing with 5,000 cars on a freeway, and that's for a 3-lane facility going one direction. But if you're looking at the interstate around a 3-lane in one direction, it's 5,000 cars carrying it today. So there is a significance of difference there. And the other thing I just want to highlight though too is that we just don't have the tools. If we're really looking at the freeways and saying that we're okay with 35, highway capacity software does not look at 35. It ends at 45 miles per hour. It does not go down that low. And then our travel demand model, from my understanding, it's not calibrated for speed. And so how do we even trust what is in there isn't correct? And again, we have things of downstream bottleneck and ramps that the throughways are not really capturing the queuing congestion that's in those models. So anyway, sorry, I know that's a lot to pass through, but I just really wanted to reiterate Don's concerns that he mentioned earlier. I mean, if we are accepting that low, we're going to be pushing cars, onto our local road systems, impacting safety and air quality. And so it's something that we really need to look at. We can't just throw a random number out there like 35 and say it's going to work. We really need to look at the science and the economic impacts.
I'd like to just say we didn't throw a random number out there. That was based on very extensive analysis that Kettleson and Associates did, looking at the same speed volume maps and really trying to figure out what's that cusp that we want to be managing the system to particularly for the throughway measure. And so I think it's based on very solid technical research, based on that engineers did, and that we'll continue to work on it. And it's not saying that you're giving up on trying to achieve better than 35, but it is allowing a morning 2 hours and an evening 2 hours that it might operate at 35, and that's pretty darn good considering how the system operates today. So that's, I don't think the public expects to drive 60 miles an hour in an urban area at any time of the day, except maybe in the middle of the night going through the area. So, I think there's public expectations here that are also part of the equation. But I just want to, emphasize this was not a random number that was just pulled out of the hat. It was over many months of looking at the information and trying to make to show, that it is a reasonable space, and we'll evaluate it more as we go forward into the RTP process.
Kim, I had not seen the technical evaluation that underpins that. Could you please make that publicly available?
Yeah, we've provided it in our TPAC workshop packet, so I'll be sure to get that to you.
So the Kittleson analysis is in that. I didn't remember seeing that.
Yeah.
And the last couple of nights driving home back into Portland from Hillsborough, I've been really happy to get above 5 miles per hour on Highway 26. And I've been thinking about that measure a lot and thinking, 35 would be looking pretty good. But yeah, no, it's been slow lately. If you guys hadn't noticed, traffic is back. So Kim, are there other points that you think are particularly important for this group to know? Like I said, the recommendation tomorrow is continue sort of accepting these as draft with a long multiple step implementation plan to evaluate more. And I heard Dawn say, make sure you look at sort of economic sort of analysis of how this looks. And it sounds like more explanations for why the numbers are picked that they were, which like you said, is buried in there. And of course, we're going to need, this affects everybody in the region, all the jurisdictions in the region. And so some way to continue to work closely together to keep our understanding going throughout this next process. Hopefully it won't be another 3 years, but another however long it takes. And I think something else to, I know that some of the measures are kind of tied to what CFEC is proposing. And there's, that's not, it's adopted for now, but we'll see if that gets changed at all too the next year in the legislative session. So lots of change. Are there any other questions for tomorrow for this TPAC agenda item for tomorrow? And in particular, so I'm there representing Washington County. Although, as you know, we all try to hang together on these significant issues. Mike is going to be there representing the cities. Is there anything more you want to share or advice? Here's another question I'd love your input on. Advice on how we're going to succinctly describe this to the WCCC.
Can I just ask that the breadth of discussion is represented tomorrow? Because I think there's definitely some differences of opinions here on this topic. And I think it's only fair to represent that when TPAC happens tomorrow. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. We can do that.
How about summarizing this succinctly for the WCCC? Any suggestions on that one? No. Okay. Well, Kim, I'll probably just steal the slideshow that you have tomorrow.
I think actually I just want to reiterate, like Dave or anybody else, if there's particular points that you'd want us to make, feel free to send them over.
Yeah, I took notes. I can read my handwriting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did, Chris, develop a 2-page fact sheet.
That's right.
Yes. That wasn't part of the packet. We weren't able to be finished in time, but I can make that available as well for your WCCC.
Oh, I'd love that. That would be great.
It's actually on the project website right now. We uploaded it yesterday.
Okay, that would be great because we pulled together our draft packet for WCC tomorrow. Okay, well, Kim, you have done double duty. I hope it doesn't discourage you from continuing to come to WCCC TAC meetings. This has been a hard one.
Opportunity to be out here with y'all. All good.
All right, and we're going to see more of Kim tomorrow. So before we jump into the other business agenda updates, which I think there's a few things for us to talk about, and we actually have time. I want to raise a point about the 2023. You guys may not notice it's November, and then December, and then future. And so we have pulled together what we believe is the schedule for WCC TAC meetings for 2023. Our question for you is, are you okay with Zoom? Do you want to try to meet back in person? I should probably take a vote on that, but who wants to meet in person? Raise your hand. Okay. Dawn does?
Don, you'll be gone. That was a joke.
All right.
Okay,
That was
we're all
actually-
gonna.
That was actually the point, Chris. I was gonna want to
Okay.
speak to the transition here too. We
Okay,
didn't
yeah,
have
I have that on to do. So go ahead with that. That's a good. point.
Yeah, so I wanted to, Chris and Mike are aware of this, and I think a few others, but as I think most of you are aware, I'm heading towards retirement. I'm officially retiring from the city of Hillsborough December 30th. Recently, I've kind of charted out my last, 8 weeks, and there's not a lot of time in office. As such, Mike has been picking up slack on the TPAC side to do this group right. We need to, I think, move to an election to be able to make sure both of our seats there are filled. That's a hard job. Typically our city reps have been, having to do duties, not just on the regional policy, but they've got, work to do on their home front at the city level. So my ask is that any of you that would be interested in having be considered in an election for TPAC lead or TPAC, obviously TPAC lead is going to be the vacancy. It's not, to be clear, it's not automatic that the alternate becomes the lead. And so, but we will have a shortage. And so I would encourage you to reach out to your mayors. Mayor Callaway is the largest mayor, is tasked with responsibility to, that's not physically space, that's the population of the city, by the way. But is tasked with calling the election, and we'd like to be able to get those nominations moving forward. I did learn just yesterday late that Mayor Callaway will be traveling for business and will miss the WCCC meeting in November. So his alternate, Councilor Van Beveren, I'll get him lined out to make a formal request for nominations with the intent being at the December meeting, any candidates would be making a presentation, probably 2 to 3 minutes to share kind of who they are and their history and so forth. But anyway, I wanted to get this on all the jurisdictions' radars so that you guys can explore. Feel free to call Mike and I or Chris. We can give you a little bit more depth in terms of what the time responsibilities are and how we work it as a team, frankly, because it's a lot. And so, but it's rewarding in that clearly there's a lot of these policies that affect all of our jurisdictions, and encourage folks to throw their hat in the ring. But anyway, communicate with your mayors so that as Mayor Callaway reaches out, they can be, knowing that you have interest. So anyway, thank you, Chris, for allowing me a moment.
Thanks, Don. And I'm going to be, when I go over the agenda tomorrow with our chair and co-chair WCC, I will remind them that we'll want to put that on the agenda, make an announcement, and then ideally, then December they can have a vote, and also ideally the nominees can get a heads up this time to be prepared to say a few words. So, and then we'll be ready to go in January with the new team.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you, Don. So a couple other things I wanted to cover on the future. I'm so happy we have time on the other business agenda items. We have a workshop tomorrow. We're all going to see each other again. It's the Climate Smart Strategy update. Kim loves us so much, she's going to come back. And what we have pulled together to send out to you immediately after this meeting is the materials, Kim, that we got about the Climate Smart Strategy from the September. You had a memo back there and some questions for TPAC.
Yeah.
And so, but if you have anything more, send it to us and we'll put it out. If you don't have it until end of the day, I can tell everybody you might get an update in the morning, or just know that when you show up tomorrow at noon, you may be seeing some new information.
Yeah.
Because these schedules are super tight.
Yeah, this one was especially tight because of the holidays coming up. And that memo that was in the September workshop, that is the background piece. I've updated it slightly. And then I also have attached the feedback that the different jurisdictional partners submitted on the questions as in response to the questions of that discussion. But essentially, the workshop is going to be just trying to ground JPAC and counselors. There's only three elected officials that were around during Climate Smart that were part of it. It's Councilor Craddock, Mayor Callaway, and Commissioner Savas. The rest is new. So it's really trying to have better understanding of what it is and what our targets actually are. But then also, previewing, what are the areas, and there was a lot of commonality across the jurisdictional feedback of where we should be looking to update, because either it's what we assumed is a little rosier than what the reality is, or there's new things that we should be thinking about that weren't really sort of on the horizon, and to get a sense from JPAC and council members of what they think we should be focusing in on as we're updating it to meet the target. So there will be online polling, and I think that the agenda might be finalized. So I'll send you whatever I can before the noon meeting.
Okay, well, I think that is a really good reminder that not everybody was here when the Climate Smart strategies were initially developed. All those scenarios were tested and coming up with tools that seem to be most effective. I suspect even among this group, people may not really remember that the state, remember in the 2009, I think it was, legislation asked, it was part of a deal that this had to be done. And it's a good reminder that our mayors may not remember that as well. So this is a really good foundational update. I appreciate that reminder. Okay, well, look for something else coming out tonight. Jean, you had a question about this?
Yeah, and maybe Kim answered it. It sounds like the agenda's coming. I'll just say that when I've been on the JPAC page, the meeting doesn't even exist.
I learned it's
the
on the
workshop doesn't
page.
exist.
It's on the Metro Council page.
It's on the Metro calendar. I've asked for, so if you go to the date on the Metro calendar, it'll take you to basically all the meeting information, and they've been posted.
Okay, so that's start on the home page. Yeah, okay. I usually just go to JPAC.
Me too. Yeah. I had to ask, and I just
on the it's not even on the. You have to click on all events. It's really buried.
Can you look at the date? Can you just go to the actual calendar date?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. It just I know I'm finding it. It's not. I feel like it should be highlighted in a way that it's not. It's really buried.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's all. Okay, thank you. I found it.
Thank you for that feedback. I will share that.
Well, whoever it was, Connor, I think I asked, and he pointed out to me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that is going to be very helpful, and I think relatively easy. It'd be a good discussion. Yeah, let's see. So I wanted to circle back. Aaron, do you want, I'm not sure I gave enough time for comments on meeting in person or not. Aaron, you had a suggestion?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw it out there, and I don't think we have to decide this today, but I think it's worth thinking about. While I understand doing these meetings virtually makes it really accessible and easy for all of us, we're in a big county, we're all in different places, I think we should consider meeting in person at least a couple of times a year. I think it really helps for building relationships with each other at the pre-meeting and the after meetings. I think are actually really valuable. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be really interesting as well to sometimes move where those meetings are so that we all have the opportunity to go to different parts of Washington County and maybe experience some of the things our various partners are dealing with. And so I think that could be a really nice way to thread that needle between making it accessible, making our schedules easier, but still have that opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better.
Well, that's a great idea. And that is a great idea, Aaron. I always enjoy it when I get to go to Tualatin or Sherwood or elsewhere, because we just don't do it as often as we used to pre-COVID.
Right. And we were all used to traveling to Beaverton for the meetings once a month before. And it took a lot of time, and sometimes it was really inconvenient. Obviously, we have the maybe the meetings aren't always in the same place. If we do it twice a year, we can pick it's the South County rotation, it's the West County rotation.
Right. I like it too. So maybe we could have some volunteers. I tell you, one of the things that used to be super time consuming was booking and making all the reservations for all the rooms and then adjusting them if they weren't available and all that. So let's follow up on that, and maybe we could have somebody post in their beautiful library or city hall or something that would be, and if we forgot an extension cord or brought the wrong in focus machine, we could find a substitute. Oh, that never happened, right?
That never used to happen. Or the door was locked, or there was an
Or the
art
door was
show
locked,
going on.
or we learned that there was a yoga class going on and we couldn't come in. Yeah, no. Yeah. Okay. I want to cover just a couple more things. TriMet Forward Together concept. Many of you submitted comments. I thought that was really helpful to have the opportunity to submit comments. I wanted to know if there was anything you all wanted to share, and then wanted you to know, in case you didn't get it, that, and maybe Michael Ray can speak to this if he wants to, but there is a press release that came out yesterday about the next steps, which is that they're going to use all the comments to refine the Forward Together and bring it to the TriMet board in December. So there'll be more opportunities to comment on that refine proposal. I couldn't mute myself in time. So Michael, is there anything that you want to add to that? Right here, the press release.
That basically is it in a nutshell. Actually, I won't be able to attend the Washington County meeting tomorrow because I will be in a workshop all day long with my fellow Trinetians to go through all of the comments that we've received over the last month and work at adjusting the concepts that were developed with all you and over the last year, and try to get something that addresses most of the concerns that have been expressed. Now we got an overwhelming amount of positive comments, especially from our partner jurisdictions, but also from quite a few of the public out there. But we do have some trouble spots that we do have to address. For Washington County, one of the biggest is Brookwood Library. And we have some others in Southwest Portland and out in East Multnomah County, and so we're going to try to hammer out those and get something that we can present to our board in December. And then with the board's buy-off, we will work at developing our annual service plan. So we'll take the Forward Together concepts and roll them into our annual service planning efforts. And we will start implementing for fiscal year 24, which is coming up.
Okay, well, I think I speak for all. I really appreciate the opportunity for the extended outreach and opportunity to review that proposal, especially it being a financially constrained one, because the service enhancement plans were not financially constrained. So this was much more real in that sense.
And it's, I mean, although the public comment period for Forward Together itself is over as of Halloween, there is also going to be public comments, of course, during every year of our service planning efforts. So there'll be plenty more time to comment as we unroll the concepts that came out of Forward Together into on the ground bus routes.
Okay, that's a good wrap up. I wanted to include that. What are some other things? The ODOT toll program update. If you all didn't know, I don't know how many of you are tracking the Regional Toll Advisory Committee. I know Mike, Mayor Bubenik is on that. The work is getting started on the NEPA analysis for tolling the rest of I-5 and I-205. And it feels like a good time to get an update on that process and how we all can be involved. This is one that's going to be even more real, I think, for Washington County than the 205 one. 205 one connects and has, of course, a lot of effects and is setting precedent for how tolling moves forward in the region. But this other one is really big and is going to be have more ramifications. So we've asked ODOT staff I asked Garrett prior to see if we could get an update in December. Just as this is going, to make sure that we all, plus our electeds, get a sense of the upcoming schedule and the opportunities to comment moving forward. So it just feels like this is heating up again on this one, and it's a good time to bring this forward. So that's anybody else, anything about the polling that anybody else wants to share?
I think I just mentioned from just what I'm seeing among citizens and citizen groups, I'm seeing more and more citizen groups getting together to be, should I say, providing input into the tolling process.
Yeah, I think there is some increased public awareness that there wasn't at the beginning. Next, we've had a couple of comments about where are we with the MISDIP 2328. Erin, do you want to give a quick update about where we are in our schedule?
Yeah, happy to. So we have been sharing results as we've been going along through the process with the board and checking in with them periodically. And I can report that they're really pleased with the work that we've done so far. They're really happy with the engagement, all of the partnership we've had with the cities, and all of the support that you've given to us throughout the process. But we're at the point now where they need to move towards making some really difficult decisions. And so we realized that we need to be able to frame up this conversation for them in the context of the larger county budget, and to really accurately convey what we've heard from all of you and from the community in order to inform that prioritization conversation. Unfortunately, that means we ran up into holiday scheduling and the fact that the board is really overloaded right now with a number of competing priorities and decision-making processes. And so that's pushed out our timelines longer than we wanted them to be. Right now, we are planning to go back to them in January. And at that time, I think we'll be having a bigger conversation about transportation funding 101, how MISDIP fits in overall with how we pay for our transportation system, and then move into that prioritization conversation with them. So looking for them to hopefully make a decision in first quarter of 2023. But again, we're still trying to figure out when we can get these various pieces in front of them. And then, of course, when we can get in front of the board, we'll also dictate when we can come back to all of you and share how that process is going and talk to the WCCC. So we still envision the process will play out the same way, as far as this group having an opportunity to make a recommendation on a prioritized list, and the WCCC then making their recommendation on that prioritized list, and the board taking action. So it pushes out all of our timelines to need to schedule those meetings, and we understand people are anxious. We don't want the work to go stale, but that's the way that it's gone with our scheduling so far. So we appreciate everybody hanging in there with us and being patient. We are still having the conversations. We're still going to be moving things forward. It's just going to take more time than we had thought when we initially laid it out.
Thanks, Erin. So we have a couple of, Jean?
Yeah, so I'm glad to circle back on this. How will this group make a recommendation? Like, will county staff put together a proposal? Like, how do we get there? And again, haven't been around this. This is my first time with MISDIP, so.
Yeah, so I think that what we intend to do is bring forward a county staff recommendation for discussion, and then hear feedback from all of the city partners and what you think of it and how it fits in and how you think we responded to the technical evaluation and the community input and all those various pieces and the wheel that went into the decision-making process. And then we'll share that with the WCCC, and then they'll have that same opportunity to weigh in on it.
You know, last month or whenever it was, last month-ish, we had the feedback from the Kittleson work and the cost estimate and risk evaluation. You know, and many of those projects had gone up in price. So how are you navigating that? Because it just, what we put in the system, you know, the machine has done the calculation, and the answer is everything costs even more money. So how are you planning on working through that? Are you talking with each city and looking at their projects, or have you even thought about this? And Erin, it's okay to say like, oh my God, I haven't thought about this. I'm doing 2 jobs.
Well, that last part is true. I am doing 2 jobs, but I have thought about this. And so, yes, all of those things, Jean. And so we are thinking about ways to be creative. Part of putting together the Transportation Funding 101 for our board is how to inform that conversation. There are ways that we can use MISDIP to leverage money, and maybe there's some opportunities here where we can leverage an external source of funds, and we should do that because these projects are now very expensive. There could be opportunities for, this is a great project, but maybe it's better suited to use this other funding source for. And so let's all work together and get that other funding source for it. And so these are all some of the conversations we're having internally. I do think we probably need to circle back with some city partners once we have a chance to get our arms around this whole thing and how we're going to have these conversations. And so we probably will do some of that to talk to you a little bit more. But I think we need to get back to the board first before we really have a handle on how we're going to approach that. So we are doing some creative thinking around these things.
Yeah, because that sticker shock, I think, hit all of us, right? For how much these things really cost.
I think we were expecting it, at least on our side, right? We knew it wasn't. We knew the numbers weren't going to go down.
Well, actually, one did.
Well, one did, but I heard from Mayor Snyder that he wanted it to go back up. So, in the future, we won't let any of them go down.
I was actually referring to a Beaverton project. So is the path forward that you're going to go to the board first in January before you start kind of cracking open what a recommendation would be? When are we going to see something? After you go to the board first?
I think we want to talk to the board first. And part of that is that we need to still have the conversation with the board about how they want to handle the programmatic aspects. And that means like the MISDIP Opportunity Fund and some of those other pieces. We are thinking again about the leverage aspect of this, and some of these are kind of big projects, and we're looking to leverage possibly federal money or maybe some state money. And so is there a better way to structure the funds than we've done it before? Maybe not a better way, but just a different way. And so I think we need to have that conversation because that informs how we prioritize, and we haven't been able to do that yet.
Got it. Okay, no, that just helps. I asked just because I'm trying to figure out what's the timeline so I can communicate that back to folks in my shop. So thank you.
Yeah. And it is difficult, and it's hard to answer the question specifically because we are then beholden to schedules and when we can actually get on agenda. So we are still pushing really hard for a first quarter of 23, but I can't really promise that either. And so we'll kind of see how these conversations go. The conversations need to happen, and they take as long as they're going to take.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Wow. We've first time I remember us getting done early. So we have time. What else do you want to see come to the TAC and WCC agendas? Any suggestions? You can always reach out to me or Jessica or Aaron or anybody with ideas. I know there's a lot going on in each city. And so if you have anything you want to share about what you're doing or what is success or any grants you won or projects you want to share, that's totally okay. So any suggestions?
TV Highway BRT.
Yeah,
I don't remember when anybody was last here, but it's going to get hard.
Yeah, I think too, I was kind of waiting to see what input they're getting now. But I thought TV Highway BRT would be good thing to bring back. There are 6 or so of the members, half of the members are already, WCC are already plugged into that. But as everything that becomes a regional priority, it's good to have the whole county understand what's going on. I would also say that at some point, the West Side Multimodal Improvement Study should come back to this group and WCCC, and the art is to try to find the right point where it's progressed enough, there's something interesting to say, but not too late that it feels like it's done. So I think those are 2. Is there anything else? Any other ideas, suggestions? Anything from THPRD, Peter? Updates to anything? No?
Not at present.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think then if that's the case, you can always reach out to us. I particularly want to thank Kim for really taking a major part in this discussion today. We've got a couple of I was to say naughty, nutty, what, not KNOTTY, naughty topics. All right. Okay. Well, it's okay if I stand early.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Chris. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye all.